Hello everyone. My name is Rumiko. This channel introduces things you should know about Japan and Japanese people for those who are interested in Japanese culture and customs, and those who are thinking about traveling to Japan. I provide information unique to Japan, such as culture, food, art, lifestyle, and tourism. In the Japanese calendar, the old name for October is Kanazuki, which is still in use today. This Kanazuki can be written in kanji like this. And if you take the kanji literally, it means the month without gods. It is said that there are 8 million gods in Japan, but what would it mean for them to disappear? In fact, every year in October of the lunar calendar, all 8 million gods from all over Japan gather at one place. That place is Izumo Taisha Shrine in Shimane Prefecture. As a result, in areas other than Izumo, it became a month without any gods, and came to be known as Kanazuki. Until the solar calendar was introduced from overseas during the Meiji period, the calendar originally used in Japan was based on the phases of the moon. October in the lunar calendar corresponds to late November or early December in the modern calendar, but October on the modern calendar is customarily called Kanazuki. So what do the 8 million gods from all over Japan gather at Izumo Taisha Shrine for? Izumo is known as the land of gods and mythology, and at its center is Izumo Taisha Shrine. Okuninushi is enshrined here. Okuninushi is the god who developed Japan's land and built the foundations of people's lives, such as farming, fishing, and industrial development. He is also famous as the god of matchmaking. It is said that the gods gather in Izumo to consult about next year's good harvest, rice and sake yields, and other matters, as well as about human destiny and matchmaking. Matchmaking refers to bringing together various human relationships, including marriage and other connections between men and women. In fact, the god Okuninushi is one of the most important gods in Japanese mythology, and also the most popular among the Japanese people. So, the theme of this article is Okuninushi. I would like to tell you the story of how Okuninushi created Japan. This story takes place in the province of Izumo, now Shimane Prefecture. This story was compiled based on the contents of the Kojiki. The Kojiki is Japan's oldest historical book, completed in 712. When he was young, Okuninushi was called Unamuchi. Unamuchi had many brothers called Yasogami. Yasogami means 80 gods, but we don't know how many brothers he actually had, or even their names. What this means is that Unamuchi had many older brothers. These Yasogami were very violent, and Unamuchi was always treated badly. One day, rumors spread that there was a beautiful princess named Yagami-hime in a place called Inaba, and upon hearing this, the Yasogami set off for Inaba to propose marriage to her. After forcing their heavy luggage onto Unamuchi, his brother gods departed in high spirits. We often imagine Unamuchi carrying a large bag, but the contents of that bag are the Yasogami's luggage. There was a white rabbit on an island called Oki. He wanted to get from the island to the mainland, so he tricked a shark. The rabbit suggested to the shark that they compete to see which rabbit had more friends. So the rabbit had the shark line up the sharks to the mainland, and counted them as he jumped on their backs. Just when they were almost to the mainland, the rabbit blurted out, "What a fool! He doesn't even realize he's been tricked." The shark heard this and bit into the rabbit, severely injuring him and peeling off all of his skin. As the rabbit was crying in excruciating pain, the Yasogami and others happened to pass by. The Yasogami and others told the rabbit to bathe in salt water from the sea and lie down in the wind, so the rabbit did as they were told. However, the sea water seeped into the wound, and when the wind blew, the rabbit's skin dried, cracked, and stung. Just then, Unamuchi, carrying the Usogami and others' belongings, passed by late. Unamuchi found the rabbit crying in agony, and asked him why he was crying. The rabbit then recounted what had happened up to that point. Unamuchi advised him to wash his body thoroughly in fresh water from the river mouth, then lie down on a bed of cattails. When the rabbit did as they had been told, its wounds healed and white fur began to grow. Then, with its wounds healed, it asked Unamuchi, "Where are you going?" Unamuchi replied, "I am going to Yagami-heim." The rabbit looked at Unamuchi intently and said, "The Isogami and the others will surely not be able to win Yagami-heim. She will choose you, your kind-hearted self, as her husband." It then bowed its head, thanked him, and flew away in front of Unamuchi. The rabbit was actually the rabbit god, a messenger from Yagami-heim. Yakama-heim had sent the rabbit when she heard that the Isogami and the others were coming. Just as the rabbit had said, when the Isogami proposed to her, Yakama-heim rejected them, saying, "I will not listen to what you have to say. I wish to marry Lord Unamuchi." The Isogami were furious when they heard this, and began discussing how to kill Unamuchi. The Usogami take Onamuchi to the foot of a mountain in Hauk. They tell him, "A rare red boar lives on this mountain. We'll drive it from the top of the mountain, and you wait below to catch it." The brother gods then roll a huge rock that has been heated red by fire down from above. Onamuchi, believing without a doubt that the falling red-hot rock is a boar, takes the rock head-on and is brutally burned to death.
When his mother, Sashikuniwaka-hime, heard of Unamuchi's death, she traveled to the heavens and begged Kama-musubi to bring Unamuchi back to life. Kama-musubi then sends his two children, Kisakai-hime, the arc-shell goddess, and Umukahi-hime, the clam goddess, to Earth. They treated Unamuchi by mixing scraped seashells with the juice and applying the mixture to his body. Then Unamuchi regained consciousness. However, upon seeing this, his brother gods quickly came up with a next plan. This time, they lured Onamuchi deep into the mountains and crushed him between a large tree, killing him. This time, his mother found Onamuchi's body, tore open the tree, pulled out his body, and revived him. Worried that he would really be killed if things continued as they were, his mother had him flee to Oyabakanokami in Ki province. However, the Usogami pursued him all the way to Ki province, relentlessly trying to kill him.
Seeing how far the Usogami had gone, the mother goddess told them to flee to Eni no Kuni, the land of the roots ruled by Susanoo. So, as he was told, Onamuchi fled to Eni no Kuni, the underworld. Onamuchi had a fateful encounter with a certain goddess once he reached Eni no Kuni. Unamuchi traveled to Eni no Kuni, the underworld, and visited Susanoo. Susanoo was originally a god of heaven. He was also the younger brother of Amaterasu, the king of heaven. However, he was an incredibly violent person who caused Amaterasu a lot of trouble, and he was eventually banished to Earth. After being banished to Earth, Susanoo ended up in the province of Izumo. Here, he spared Kushinada-hime, who was about to be sacrificed to Yamato no Orochi, on the condition that she become his bride, and defeated Yamato no Orokai. Yamato no Orokai is a dragon with 1 body, 8 heads, and 8 tails. From the tail of the defeated Yamato no Orochi came the third of the 3 sacred treasures, the Kusanagi sword. Susanoo presented this sword to Amaterasu, completing the collection of all 3 sacred treasures. Afterwards, Susanoo fell in love with the land of Izumo, and decided to live there. He happily married Kushinada-hime, and gave birth to a family of gods. The 5th-generation grandson of this descendant was Unamuchi. When Unamuchi visited, Susanoo had built a palace in the underground realm, and was living there. Suddenly, a young girl came out. It was Susanoo's daughter, Suzeri-hime. The two fell in love with each other at first sight, and married without her father's knowledge. Unamuche had supposedly married Yakamahime in Inaba, but polygamy was common at the time and not a problem. In fact, Unamuche would go on to marry several other women. So the two begged Susanoo for permission to marry. However, Susanoo did not easily agree. To Susanoo, Onomucha seemed like nothing more than a timid man who had been brutally bullied by the Isogami. What's more, he had killed him twice. And to test Onomucha's resolve, he put him to various trials. His first test was to sleep in a bedroom filled with countless squirming snakes. Worried about Onomuchi, Suzureheim handed him a scarf with magical powers, saying, "If a snake attacks you, wave this scarf 3 times." Onomuchi entered the room filled with snakes. Soon, a swarm of snakes came crawling up to Onomuchi's feet. Summoning his courage, Onomuchi waved his scarf 3 times. The effect was immediate, as the snakes meekly retreated in the direction they had come from. He was able to spend the night in the room without incident. And so Onomuchi successfully completed his first test. His second test was to sleep in a bedroom filled with centipedes and bees. Again, Suzureheim helped Onomuchi by giving him a scarf that possessed the same magical powers. When he did as she asked, the insects stopped moving and no longer bit or sting him. He was able to spend the night in the room without incident. For the third trial, Susanoo fires an arrow into a wide field and commands Unamuche to go and retrieve that arrow. This seems easy compared to the previous trials, but when Unamuche enters the field to retrieve the arrow, Susanoo sets the field on fire. Just as Unamuche is about to give up, thinking this is the end, a rat suddenly appears and tells him about a cavity beneath the ground. Unamuche stomps with all his might on the entrance to the rat's nest. A large hole opens up, and Unamuche falls into it. Inside, he survives the flames. The rat then finds the arrow that Susanoo had fired. Suzureheim, unaware of this, breaks down in tears, thinking Unamuche is dead, but she emerges safe and sound, arrow in hand. Unamuche returns the arrow to Susanoo, and the two return to his home together. Susanoo, beginning to regard Unamuche with a new opinion, invited him into his bedroom as a final test, commanding him to remove the lice from my head. However, what was on Susanoo's head was not a louse, but a centipede. Suzureheim came to Unamuche's aid again, bringing him muku fruit and red clay. Suzureheim then whispered in Unamuche's ear, "Chew on these fruit, put this clay in your mouth, and spit them out. You'll think you're grabbing the centipede in your hair, chewing it up, and spitting it out." When Susanoo did this, he believed that Unamuche was actually chewing up the centipede and spitting it out, and his liking for him grew. Susanoo became very sleepy, and eventually fell asleep. "Now, let's escape together," saying, Unamuche tied Susanoo's long hair to the beams in the room and blocked the entrance to the house with a large stone. Unamuche then took Susanoo's sword, bow and arrows, and harp, and fled with Suzureheim on his back. Just then, the harp struck a tree, the ground shook, and a loud noise rang out. This woke Susanoo, and when he got up, his entire house collapsed. Susanoo pursued them to the boundary between the underworld and the surface world, but was unable to catch them. So he cried out, "Unamuche! I give you my weapons, my treasures, and my daughter. You use your weapons to drive the Isogami to the ends of the earth, even to the depths of the sea. If they still defy you, kill them all. And you will become the great lord of the land above, Okuninushi. And build for me and Suzureheim a palace that reaches to the heavens." At this moment, Susanoo was not entirely displeased that Unamuche, whom he had mocked, had outdone him. He even thought that if a man could outwit him so easily, he could entrust his precious suzerain to him. And so Unamucha took Suzerain as his wife and returned to Izumo. From this time on, Onamucha changed his name to Okuninushi in order to become the ruler of the land. The name Okuninushi means master of a great land. Okuninushi's return also comes as a shock to the 80 gods who ruled Izumo. The Yasogami came to attack Okuninushi's mansion. Using the sword and bow given to him by Susanoo, Okuninushi defeated the 80 gods one by one. However, he did not try to take their lives, and succeeded in driving them out of Izumo. This meant that Okuninushi came to rule Izumo. Okuninushi took Suzerain as his legal wife, and began building the country of Izumo. However, Okuninushi was married to Yakamahime in Inaba. While Okuninushi was away, Yakamahime returned to her hometown of Inaba. Upon learning of Okuninushi's return, Yakamahime returned to Izumo. At the time, Yakamahime was pregnant and about to give birth. When Yakamahime was reunited with Okuninushi, she learned that he had also married Suzerain. Learning that Suzerain, the daughter of Susanoo, was known to have a jealous nature, Yakamahime became afraid. Even if I tell them the child is Okuninushi's, will they really treat him as a child of the royal family of Izumo province? But even if I give birth in Inaba, who should I tell them who the child is, she worried. Yakamahime gave up on Okuninushi, and decided to return to Inaba. However, as she was already close to full term, she gave birth in Izumo. There was nowhere for the baby to go in either Izumo or Inaba, so Yakamahime tearfully left the child behind in this place. She gently placed the child between the branches of a tree, hoping that someone would find him quickly, and return to Inaba. Having given up on her beloved Okuninushi, and let go of her beloved child, Yakamahime, exhausted both mentally and physically, stopped off at Yunokawa Onsen on her way home, and left behind a song. I long for the hot springs at the foot of the volcano, which calm my love, which burns as hot as a volcanic crater. Even if it was a painful love that burned my body, I still wanted to be his wife. One day, as Okuninushi, troubled by the task of building his country, was walking along the coast of Izumo, he noticed a small boat rocking gently on the waves. Aboard the boat was a small god named Sukunabiko. The gods of heaven told Okuninushi, make a pact with Sukunabiko as brothers and protect and strengthen the country. Sukunabiko had been sent by the gods of heaven. After that, Sukunabiko became Okuninushi's right-hand man, and the two of them worked together to build the country. Sukunabiko's achievements were enormous, and he went beyond spreading the teachings of how to create rice paddies, farm, and build houses. He also spread medicines and medical techniques to cure illnesses, and taught how to brew sake. He even taught how to drill for hot springs, discovering several famous hot springs. In this way, the two made the country of Izumo prosperous and peaceful. Just as the country was nearing completion, Sukunabiko said, "My role is now complete," and returned to heaven. Okuninushi was at a loss as to how he should proceed with building his country alone, and lost track of direction, so he gazed out to sea, when a god appeared, shining light on the surface of the water. The god who appeared was Okuninushi. Okuninushi was actually Okuninushi's alter ego, his soul, and he told him that if he would be respectfully worshipped, his nation building would be complete. Okuninushi enshrined Okuninushi on Mount Miwa in Yamato province. He then worked hard at building his country, never giving up until the very end, and finally completed it. We will now move on to the climax of Japanese mythology, the land transfer, but before that, I would like to talk about an episode involving Okuninushi. Okuninushi is said to have had many wives and a great many children. Ultimately, it is said that he married 6 goddesses, or as many as 20 if local legends are included, and that he fathered 180 children. For this reason, he is still enshrined in shrines today as the deity of matchmaking and fertility. We have already mentioned Yakama Hime of Inaba and Susuri Hime, the daughter of Susanoo. Polygamy was a practice at the time, and Okuninushi himself married many wives. However, most of these were wife-visiting marriages, in which the couple lived in different homes and the husband visited his wife's home. Here, I would like to introduce Okuninushi's famous wife-visiting rituals. Nunakawa Hime. One day, Okuninushi heard of a beautiful princess named Nunakawa Hime in Koshu province and visited her home to propose marriage. Koshu province is a source of precious jade, and is known as the Queen of Jade. Okuninushi stood in front of Nunakawa Hime's house until morning, unable to open the door. Nunakawa Hime told him that she appreciated his feelings, but that she was uneasy about his sudden arrival. She also told him that she wanted him to embrace her the next night. Okuninushi visited Nunakawa Hime again the following night, and the two were married. The child born to the couple was Takanamikata, which later appears in the scene of the transfer of the country. Takiri Hime. When the heavenly deities Amaterasu and Susanoo had a dispute over something they could not compromise on, they made a pledge, and conducted a divination to determine who was in the right. When Amaterasu bit Susanoo's sword, 3 goddesses were born from the mist that erupted. These 3 are known as the Munakata 3 goddesses, and one of them is Takiri Hime. Kamuyutate Hime. Although detailed records are scarce, she is known to have given birth to Koto Shiranushi. She is also considered to be the same deity as Tajitsu Hime, one of the 3 Munakata goddesses mentioned earlier. This means that Okuninushi was married to 2 of the 3 Munakata goddesses. Susuri Hime lived as Okuninushi's legal wife, but due to polygamy, her husband would take new wives one after another. Okuninushi was also very active in the romantic field, but this was not just for fun, it was also part of his nation-building efforts. He traveled from place to place, furthering his nation-building, and married the goddesses of each land. Marrying these goddesses had political significance, as he was bonding with the god of the land. Even so, Susuri Hime, who was naturally jealous, only grew more and more angry. One day, it was decided that Okuninushi would march into Yamato province. It is said that Okuninushi, fed up with Susuri Hime's jealousy, decided to stay away on purpose. However, as Susuri Hime looked very sad as she was left behind in the palace, Okuninushi composed a song and presented it to her. My beloved wife. When I go to Yamato province, you pretend not to cry, but in truth you will. Your sadness will be so great that the morning rain will turn to mist and hang over you. Susuri Hime was so moved when she received Okuninushi's song, which sympathized with the loneliness of those who were seeing him off, that she presented Okuninushi with a song in return. My beloved Okuninushi. Since you are a man, you will probably have a young wife wherever you go. But I am a woman, so there are no men other than you. I have no other husband than you. Please rest peacefully in my fluffy bedclothes, touching and stroking my soft, white chest and pale arms, and resting your head on my arm. After conveying the song, Susuri Hime offers Okuninushi some sake, and the two share a cup of sake and promise their love as husband and wife. Despite all that had happened, this song, which expressed their honest feelings, was the catalyst for the couple to reconcile, and they are now enshrined together in a shrine together in harmony. However, in a later story, after Okuninushi had successfully completed building his country, he was ordered by Amaterasu to hand it over to him. At that time, it was said that the goddess of Izumo could not be trusted as Okuninushi's legal wife, so Okuninushi was forced into a political marriage with a goddess from heaven named Mahotsu Hime. It seems that this was a rather forceful marriage, and Susuriheim was forced to live apart from Okuninushi. It is said that in her later years, she was not even allowed to meet Okuninushi, and the devoted Susuriheim endured many difficult days. From here on, we will talk about the climax of ancient Japanese mythology, the transfer of the land. Around the time that Okuninushi completed the creation of the country, Amaterasu, the leader of the heavens, thought, "I want my child to rule this beautiful country." She sent Amenahotep to the earth. However, the world on earth was still in a state of noisy chaos, and she wasn't confident that he could rule, so she turned back and reported this to Amaterasu. Next, she sent Amenahotep. However, Amenahotep followed Okuninushi and, even after 3 years, had not carried out his orders. So this time, Amenahotep was given a bow and arrows and descended to earth, but he ended up marrying Okuninushi's daughter, Shitataruheim, and thinking that he would eventually become king of Izumo, so he did not report anything even after 8 years had passed. So she sent a pheasant called Nanakeim to check on the situation, but it was shot dead by Amenahotep, and the arrow pulled out of the pheasant and reached heaven. When the arrow was thrown back from heaven, it pierced Amenahotep's chest, killing him. Takemikazuchi was then dispatched. Takemikazuchi stood his long sword upside down on the water's edge, sat cross-legged on the edge of the blade, and urged Okuninushi to cede the country. Okuninushi replied, "I cannot make this decision on my own," leaving the decision to his son, Koto Shiranashi. When Koto Shiranashi agreed to cede the country, he said, "I would like my other child, Takeminakata, to hear it too." Takeminakata did not immediately agree, and challenged Takemikazuchi, saying, "Let's settle this in a contest of strength," but was defeated and fled. Cornered at Lake Suwa in Shinano, he finally agreed to cede the country. Upon hearing that his 2 sons had agreed, Okuninushi finally accepted the cede of the country. "I have no objections. My only request is that in exchange for giving up my country, I beg you to build me a large, magnificent palace for me to live in. As for my children, if you take the lead in serving the descendants of the heavenly gods, then none of them will dare to refuse," he replied. Okuninushi's wish was granted, and a large shrine was built. This is today Izumo Taisha Shrine. Okuninushi then enshrined him there and entrusted him with commanding his 180 godsons. With this transfer of the country, Okuninushi separated from Susuriheim and married Mahotsuheim. Okuninushi and Susuriheim had lived together happily, but were separated by the transfer of the country due to political considerations. After that, the descent of the heavenly grandson and the eastern expedition of Emperor Jimmu took place, and the modern-day Japanese nation was established. The reason why the gods gather at Izumo Taisha Shrine in October of the lunar calendar was originally for Okuninushi to gather all of his 180 children together once a year. However, other gods were drawn in by this, and soon all the gods had gathered there.
Thank you, Rumiko. Hello everyone. This is Jay. From here on, I'll provide some additional information. It is said that during Kanazuki, the 10th month of October in Japan, 8 million gods from all over Japan gather at Izumo Taisha Shrine. This might lead you to think that since there are no gods at shrines, there is no point in going to them. But don't worry. In reality, the gods remain at shrines around the country through bunrei, splitting the spirit, and it is possible to visit them. It is believed that the shrine's priests divide the bunrei, splitting the spirit, so that the god remains at the shrine even during meetings at Izumo Taisha, protecting the people. In fact, it is the bunrei, splitting the spirit, that travels to Izumo Taisha for the meetings, while the main body remains at the shrine. So, of course, that does not mean that the shrine is empty. Thanks to this idea of bunrei, splitting the spirit, shrines enshrining the same god can be found all over Japan. One of the reasons so many shrines were built using bunrei, splitting the spirit, is said to be to make it easier to visit. Splitting the spirit does not affect the original divine spirit, and the Bunrei, splitting the spirit, is said to have the same power as the main shrine. There is no distinction between real and fake, and it is believed that all are connected and protect each other. Shrines also have sacred trees. You can tell by looking at them because they have a rope wrapped around their thick trunk and a piece of white paper hanging from it. These sacred trees have the role of listening to wishes on behalf of the gods. So, after praying, you can be sure your wish will be granted if you stop by the tree and make your wish again. When you do, it's a good idea to ask the tree to pass on a message to the gods, saying something like, "Please convey this to the gods." There are also large rocks with ropes wrapped around them, and it is believed that gods reside in these rocks as well. In this story, the scene where Susanoo slays Yamata no Orokai was rather brief, so I'd like to explain how he did it. After being banished from heaven for his tyranny, Susanoo descended to the land of Izumo. A short distance from there, they came across an elderly couple and their daughter crying. The princess's name was Kushinada Hime. According to the old couple, deep in the mountains lives a giant 8-headed serpent called Yamata no Orokai, who appears in the village once a year to devour the girls one by one. As a result, of the 8 daughters they once had, only Kushinada Hime remains, and it is that time of year again when the serpent returns to eat the girls. Upon hearing their story, Susanoo decided to defeat Yamata no Orokai in exchange for his daughter being his wife. First, he had a fence built around his house, with 8 entrances made in it, and had large vessels filled with strong sake placed at each entrance. After a while, Yamata no Orokai arrived. It was a terrifying sight. Its 8 heads had shining red eyes, and its body was so large it could stretch beyond the mountains. As soon as Yamata no Orokai saw the sake, it plunged headfirst into the vessel and began to drink it down with gusto. The snake then became drunk and fell asleep. At that moment, Susanoo drew his Totsuka no Tsurugi, sword of the gods, and attacked the giant serpent. He cut through its head with tremendous force, then its stomach, and finally its tail, but the Totsuka no Tsurugi chipped off. Wondering what was going on, he split the tail open and revealed a magnificent sword. The name of the sword is introduced as Kusanagi no Tsurugi, but Kusanagi no Tsurugi is a name given to it from a later episode with Yamato Takeru. And its original name was Ama no Murakumo no Tsurugi. And the Totsuka no Tsurugi used by Susanoo appears in various scenes, so it seems to be a general name rather than the name of a specific sword. After marrying Kushinada Hime, Susanoo built a palace there and lived there, giving birth to many gods, and his descendants 6 generations later would become Okuninushi. One might wonder whether Susanoo's descendants could marry his own daughters, but after 6 generations, Susanoo's blood has become considerably diluted, so it seems possible. In fact, Susanoo was a tyrannical and violent man, but Okuninushi is portrayed as the weakest being in Japanese mythology. The myth of Okuninushi is quite extensive, taking up around 20% of the Japanese history book, the Kojiki. The story of the White Rabbit of Inaba, which begins the story, is a famous anecdote known to all Japanese children. Okuninushi and Susuri Hime were eventually forced to part ways and were separated, but there is a monument to the two of them at Izumo Taisha Shrine. There is a painting of the two of them exchanging a cup of sake to mark their marriage vows, so be sure to take a look if you visit Izumo Taisha Shrine. The 2 rabbits in front of the painting are also cute, exchanging a cup of sake. By the way, Susuri Hime and rabbits have no connection whatsoever. Rabbits are related to Yakama Hime. However, rabbits are important deities at Izumo Taisha Shrine, and statues of them can be found throughout the shrine. As I mentioned in another video, Japan has the 7 gods of fortune, a group of gods who bring good fortune. One of these gods, Daikokyuten, is actually Okuninushi. Buddhism was introduced to Japan during the Noro period, but in the Heian period it merged with Japan's native Shinto religion, with gods and Buddhas being seen as the same thing and influencing each other. This religious phenomenon is called syncretism of Shinto and Buddhism. The Japanese gods are believed to be Buddhas who transformed themselves to save people. This seems far-fetched when you think about it, but it has created a huge boom among Japanese people, who love new things. The origin of Daikokyuten is said to be Mahakala. Mahakala is a god created by Buddhism to rival Shiva, the most powerful god in Hinduism. He is, in a sense, the greatest general of Buddhism. The design exactly borrows the appearance of the god Shiva, and to distinguish him as a Buddhist deity rather than a Hindu one, he is depicted trampling on Hindu gods such as Shiva. As he was brought to Japan via China, he changed from his violent deity of destruction to his current gentle appearance. He then became a syncretic god of Shinto and Buddhism with the Japanese deity Okuninushi, and came to be worshipped as a god who bestows food and treasures. He wears a hood, and the bag he carries on his left shoulder represents treasure, the magic mallet he holds in his right hand represents gushing wealth, and the straw rice sack he holds between his feet represents a good harvest. The large bag originally held the belongings of his brother deities, but its contents later became treasure. There is another 7 lucky gods, Ibisu, whose origins are said to be Koto Shironashi, the son of Okuninushi. He is depicted holding a fishing rod in his right hand and a sea bream in his left. This comes from Koto Shironashi's love of fishing, and he is said to have a gentle and laid-back personality. In the story of the land transfer, Okuninushi tries to make excuses to the heavenly god Takamikazuchi by saying, "I'll have to ask my son Koto Shironashi first." But then Okuninushi decides to bring Koto Shironashi over in an instant. At that moment, he brings along Koto Shironashi's boat, where he was enjoying a leisurely day of fishing. As expected, he is too strong an opponent and Koto Shironashi readily agrees to hand over the country. Perhaps he was so scared that he turned the boat he was on upside down and hid inside. The fact that there are 2 of them among the 7 lucky gods shows how popular Okuninushi was among the common people. Finally, please understand that there were various ways to write and pronounce the names, but as they are old Japanese names, AI is unable to pronounce them like in Japanese, and this was the result of a lot of trial and error. Thank you for watching until the end today. Please look forward to the next video. Well, goodbye.